What's going on, everybody? Tim from Tierfon Orbital. This is going to serve as a very short and quick rundown video of a commission that I just completed for the Phoenix Props Jedi Killer. Client was not very happy with the performance of the chassis that came with this build. So he requested that we do a removable battery setup and a new speaker, and I'll get into all that, and we'll talk about why he chose to upgrade the chassis. But we'll also talk about the hilt itself, and we'll do a quick demo, like I always do, right? So let's get right into it, okay? So this is the Phoenix Props Jedi Killer. It is an absolutely fantastic hilt. It looks fantastic. Let me get up into frame here. It's beautifully weathered. There's a lot of greebly work on this hilt. It looks phenomenal. Okay, I really like what they did in the crystal chamber, and I'll talk about that. So let's talk about the hilt first, right? We'll start at the bottom. Much like the Darkness V3 and some of the other Kylo hilts, to keep this pommel film accurate, right? A lot of times what you see are these there's these pommel caps that just dead end, right? There's no venting in them. The speaker is in here, but it doesn't have a lot to vent out of. Now, this engine section, there are some perforated holes, but you do have, there's just not a lot of venting to begin with, okay? And I didn't want to go cutting holes into the engine section or anything like that. So this was one of the main reasons why the client wanted this chassis upgrade. Okay, so the existing chassis, actually I can show you, this was the existing chassis. I do not know who designed this. I do know it was available on Shapeways, right? And whoever installed it with this chassis. Now, it is a stationary battery setup, and the reason that you do need it, so the reason I'm assuming that the designer went with that is because there's just not a lot of room in this grip section, okay? Like, it stops right here. Because of this engine section, you've got about 3 inches of space in the grip, and then maybe another inch up in this waist section. So there's just not a lot of room. So a stationary battery would be the way to go, right? However, what I don't understand is this kill key / charging post. It sits right on top of that speaker. There is a 24mm speaker in here, but it's severely hindered by the placement of this post section, right? There is venting in it, but it just sounds really muffled. And then that tied in with the fact that there just isn't good venting in the grip section, it just really weakens speaker performance, right? So I alleviated that with my chassis design. My chassis design is a removable battery, but it is what they call a floating chassis. And I'll talk about that when we're done talking about the hilt. But yeah, there's this really cool, like, magnetized greebly here. I don't know what this is for, to be quite honest with you. I'm sure, builders could utilize that as some kind of switch solution. There's a hole here. There are 2 switches, main and aux, that are behind some vinyl rubberized covers here. The crystal chamber is also very beautiful. So there's 2 very small quartz points in this crystal chamber, but they're surrounded by this really cool aluminum baffling. And it looks like it's kind of blown out. I've never seen that before in a crystal chamber, and I really like that. It looks phenomenal. And your typical, nice weathering on it. We've got this exposed wire. And I do believe the client has the posts to keep this wire in place on the grip. I'm assuming he removed those just to make it easier to get the grip off, right? So let's talk about how to use the saber. Okay, so you unscrew your grip. I already unscrewed it prior to this video. The chassis is a tiny chassis. Okay, in order to slide your chassis out and get at the battery, there is a set screw in the threading here. You want to loosen that so your chassis is free. Slide your chassis out. Now, I recommend doing this on a flat surface. Slide your chassis out. Take your battery. The battery in this particular build is negative side to the top of the hilt, which is not typical in my builds, but given the space allotments with this particular setup, I did need to go with the negative towards the blade. So your flat part's going to go towards the blade. You sit your battery in there.
It's time to let things die.
And you're going to hear an audible cue that lets you know you've got a good connection. Slide your chassis back up and just tighten that set screw. Now don't tighten too much. You don't want to crack the chassis. Just make sure it's hugging the chassis, and you're good to go, okay? And then you want to put your grip back on. Now I did make a little beauty ring / resonance ring for this particular build. And you just want to slide that on first, and then you're good to go. Slide your grip all the way in until it stops, and then you're good, right? So let's come back down and I'll talk about some other stuff, okay? Right, so as I mentioned, because this was a chassis swap and not a complete rebuild, there were some caveats with this particular build process, right? So when you're doing a chassis swap, it's not always easy. Obviously, any build is like surgery, but doing swaps is even worse. Not worse, but it's even more difficult because you want to make sure that you're salvaging as much as you can. So you want to salvage the board, you want to try and salvage some of the wire work. So it's not always easy, right? But I think I'm happy with the way that it turned out, and I feel like the speaker performance is so much better anyhow. So I'm not quite sure why. I mean, I know why. The original designer went with that particular setup. It's because you can have a kill switch and a kill key underneath this pommel, and that's handy. But it just really degrades speaker performance, and having a removable battery is a lot better in my opinion anyhow. You can just swap the battery out. So let's do a little demo. So like I said, the top switch is your activation, and the bottom is your aux. Let's put a blade in it, right? At the top of the emitter here, you have a set screw. Just make sure that's backed out so you can get your blade in. Make sure the blade is resting on those PCB pins. And then you tighten your set screw. Just make sure it's hugging that blade. Twist to activate and deactivate is on. And there we go. Yeah, it's way louder. So one thing I did notice about these switches, and this was similar to the Darkness V3 from SP Sabers, they're just behind these rubberized grips, and I'm just so spoiled in that I'm used to actually like having a nice defined tactile clicky switch. That's kind of hard to feel where those switches are underneath these, but once you know where they're at, they're easy to find. So let's see what else we got. So I put all of my own blade animations on here. There are 2 NeoPixels, top and bottom, for the crystal chamber. They are their own blade as well. And I do that, each one is different for each font, but they all have that cool down, like crystal cool down animation. See what else we got on here. Right, so that's it. A nice quick rundown, whoops. A nice quick rundown on the Phoenix Props Jedi Killer. Thank you very much to the client for trusting me with this build and the swap. Thank you very much to the viewers. If you guys have any questions or comments, please don't be a stranger or reach out. I'm always open to questions and criticisms and all that good stuff. And with that being said, thank you very much for watching, and may the Force be with you always.